Welcome to Affinity, a Fin Partners podcast where we educate and explore the impact of transformative marketing communications. My name is Aleksandra King. On today's episode, join us as we delve into how brands connect with their audiences, how ideas are sparked, and how innovative storytelling earns attention and drives results. Chris and Elliot, welcome to the Affinity podcast. Chris, we'll start with you. Could you tell us about yourself, what you do, about Medite Smartply and your key customers?
Yep, I'm Chris. I'm responsible for all the commercial operations for my business, Medite Smartply. Medite Smartply is within the forestry division within Ireland. And actually our parent is the Irish government. So we'd be known as a semi-state organisation. We produce highly engineered timber panels. One business unit would go into typically into the construction sector for building new homes, for example. And we've got another business unit that would go into typically furniture-based products. We export to approximately 20 countries around the world. UK, Ireland, clearly very important markets to us, as are France, Belgium, Holland, the United States, for example. We have real focus within those areas. And we tend to go to market on two bases. We either have trading partners, distributors, that we would operate within an indirect business. So leading timber-based businesses around the markets, or indeed will operate with large manufacturing businesses, so people that may be making homes within a factory, making kitchens within a factory environment, making doors or that type of thing.
And now, Elliot, over to you.
So my name's Elliot King. I'm a managing partner inside Fin Partners. I work in the integrated marketing division, and we've been working with Chris and Medite for just under a year now, and we're operating a fully integrated marketing strategy that cuts across PR, social media, paid media, and digital marketing.
So in terms of the type of marketing that you need to do and the types of customers that you sell to or businesses, can you tell us more about that and how that works?
As a business, we actually operate across about 20 countries.
Wow.
We have a core focus across the UK, Ireland, Holland, Belgium, France, and the United States, but we do have some products that travel a little bit further than that. The way that we tend to go to market would be either on a direct or an indirect basis. So we would use wholesale partners. In some countries, we will have merchant partners, and then depending upon who the customer may be, we may also have a direct relationship with large manufacturing businesses that may be making kitchens, they may be making doors, or indeed they may be making off-site manufactured units for homes.
Right, so that sounds like quite a complicated marketing process that you need to have in place to make sure you're talking to the right people in the right way. And you've engaged Fin Partners and Elliot, so you will know a lot about that. But how does the marketing differ then when you're speaking to all these different people?
Well, what we tend to have is that the business distills into three distinct business units. And essentially what we have a different proposition within each business unit. Clearly we have an overall strategy for the business, but that distills into those individual strategic business units. And then, again, depending upon which country that we may be operating in, we may have a slightly different tactic that we deploy within each market. So, for example, given that we have Irish parentage, we want to behave slightly differently within the market. We want to be at the front of the queue. We don't just want to be part of the gang. But within the UK, for example, we would want to be part of the gang. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is just part of the larger construction industry. But when we engage with Fin, it's very much about trying to articulate each individual business unit, the ambitions and the objectives that we have, to then make sure that our partners are understanding the different nuances that we have in the way that we're trying to deploy those tactics. And typically that may be by sector, that may be by country. And so that's the learning process that we really go through in the first instance to try and articulate that so that we're all on the same page at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenging sort of go-to-market strategy, because as Chris has just articulated, there's 3 different divisions. There's a whole host of countries we're selling to, and there's different routes to market, and obviously there's different customer types. And broadly speaking, it's an integrated strategy. So there's PR in there, there's some paid media, and there's the social media, and obviously content. And as Chris has alluded to, you need to localize for the market, but also get the right tactic and the right channel and message for the right customer type. It's challenging, but it's really interesting work.
It sounds like it's more work for the marketing teams. You have to be really...
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
And it's, and again, we're not deploying huge budgets. So everything's going to be very well understood, clearly defined, and not quite forensic, but almost in the way that we're trying to make sure that we've got real clarity of what we're trying to do and where we're trying to do it and to whom. Because, we can't really afford too much wastage in our messaging. Yeah. And so, and again, the baseline from there really comes from, I think, just, good dialogue. We've had a good introduction, haven't we? We've had... what has it been now, 8, 9, 10 months or whatever it may be since we first engaged. And it's just trying to invest in the relationship to make sure that as we go through the programs, that ultimately that we can see and touch the returns and really get an understanding on how effective we're actually trying to be in those areas together. My expectation from Finn is that they need to add value to my thinking. Yeah.
Totally.
And so... the last thing that we look for is someone that gives us what we ask for, because that assumes that we've got the right answer. And I try to communicate to all the people within the team that that's not where you are. You can have a framework, but you've got to get that engagement. And so whether that's about, the effectiveness of particular techniques, whether that's just about knowledge, whether that's about experiences, whatever it may be, it's making sure that we're drawing on that in. And again, in a young relationship, I'm confident that we've started to get, that type of pull through in the way that we're starting to work together,
Yeah, I love that. It is the value that's added. That's spot on.
For this strategy, a good analogy, it's almost like we're hosting a dinner party and we've got a lot of different types of guests who have slightly different tastes and slightly different needs, and so we need to serve up the right dishes at the right time to the right people. And broadly speaking, the end users of these products, what we're trying to do is it's almost like brand marketing. So we want to show the value of those end users, so they come towards, either if it's a direct customer, they come and buy from us direct, but if it's through one of our distributors or resellers, they're requesting the product from that channel. And so we're pushing the message to our resellers, and the brand messaging is looking to pull those end users of the product towards.
Okay. And then how do you manage your brand visibility when you've got all these multiple supply chain partners that are going to have an influence on the marketing as well? How do you manage that?
It almost comes into 2 elements for us, whereby a large part of what we try to do is relationship based with our customers. Yeah, I think that perhaps the thing to underline is that we operate in a highly commoditized environment. Timber, at the end of the day, is a globally traded commodity. So yes, we have some domestic competitors, we have European competitors, but the Brazilians are here, the Chinese are here,
yeah.
And so it really creates a lot of pressure on trade flows, the supply route, price propositions, everything that comes in. So we have a large part which is really focused on how we engage. So it's relationship based, it's the core proposition of the business, it's quality, it's technical leadership, it's all those points of difference. And what we try to really do, and you could say that that's 80% of the business that we're operating in. And relatively speaking, we're quite a modest size organisation. So typically we'll be about 350 million euro, but some of our competitors will be 5, 6, 7 billion. So whilst we have some of the world's leading manufacturing facilities, we only have one of them for one product group and one of them for another product group. We'll be competing against people that have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 within that type of space. So again, we're dealing with scale. So from a marketing point of view, it's really about making sure that we, again, coming back, I think that we have good plans. They're well devised and they're well presented and they're well articulated, and we just simply try to put them in front of the customer, and by doing that, the demonstration of that is really to try and create this pull through on the 20% of the business that really gives us the opportunity to stand out from everybody else that's operating in that highly commoditized sector. So it's all about value added. So, and that can be articulated in different ways. That may be service, that may be product features and properties, that may be something that complies with legislation which is here today or is coming round the corner. And it's being able to take those messages and then, work with Finn and the team. It's not for me to say, it goes that way or it goes this way. It's very much being able to just communicate that and then devise the best strategy to actually be able to deploy those messaging. We're very traditional. So to move into the world of social and all of that type of area, that's new for us. We've been walking into it, but I think we're running into that type of area now, but very much being led and supported by Finn within that space. And so again, that's a really important part to make sure that we're modern within that space for what's a very traditional business in a very traditional product category, albeit from an architectural point of view and a specification point of view on a sustainability aspect, it's the preferred area that people want to engage with for again dealing with all of the challenges around carbon abatement and such like within the markets.
Yeah, it sounds like your business is adding that value.
Yeah.
You're talking about adding that value. It also sounds like actually from what you're saying the USP that you have, I would think that you're big enough as a business to make significant impact.
Again, it all comes back into the relationship of how we begin to articulate that. So effectively, in the way that we're trying to personify our relevance, our customers can see it and touch it and engage within it. And that's how we're trying to move within that space. But at the same time, to be nimble, to be agile, and to make sure that we have short decision-making lines, we have quick actions. And that then means that, we may have a great strategic plan, but tactically we might need to switch that left and right. And so again, that's a really important quality that I look for within the partnership that we would have, that it's not a case of everything's set and it's defined for the next 6 months. Because although it's a very traditional industry, if you look at the competitive behaviours and landscapes, we need to be able to move left and right on relatively short notice. And again, that's through our behaviours, our marketing programmes, our decision-making from a pricing point of view, all of those things that are wrapped up.
Yeah. So Elliot, how does that translate more technically into delivering this?
Firstly, from a practical perspective, it's important that you set up a kind of an annual plan, if you like. This is our top level strategy. These are for the 3 different divisions, these are the different customer types we're going after. Here's the messages we want to present. That this is our route to market, whether it's direct or via distributors or resellers. But obviously, and we've got our channels and our tactics and all the rest of it. But things change, right? And it's exactly what Chris is saying. So we're working on these channels on a daily basis, the teams, but at least on a weekly basis, and it's not every day, we're liaising with Chris's internal marketing team, we're tweaking messaging, we're moving budget around when it's a paid media. Chris's business has to react to the market, and therefore the marketing strategy has to be equally nimble and equally flexible.
So you're constantly taking that temperature and
absolutely
and responding constantly.
Yeah, particularly in the digital world where you have this feedback, right? You have this data coming in all of the time, and that's kind of built into the work in any case. But having that route inside the business, so it's a two-way communication. It's not just us being told what to do and us feeding back. It's much more flexible and much more integrated, the partnership, and therefore the strategy becomes much more effective.
You spoke earlier about, the value that also you add to your customers, to your clients, to other businesses. How do you ensure that your value is communicated in the right way to these people? How do you ensure that they really get it?
We want to make sure that our customers see us without being there. And so what I mean by that is that clearly the effectiveness of our marketing programs are felt and seen without us actually having to tell them that this is what we're doing. Because I think actually that's really a key measure of how effective we are. So it's always really good from my point when actually we get a customer that will challenge a competitor that they're not behaving or promoting themselves as well as what Medite is doing.
Good.
So for me, how do I judge it? That's the money shot for me.
Yeah.
Now, of course, they may be doing that to gain some form of commercial leverage, but notwithstanding that, they've seen it. They're aware of what we're doing. And they recognise that, and that's a point of difference that they will then take into their competitive conversations that they may be having with our or their other suppliers, our competitors, that they need to address, they need to front up, and so I think that's one of the areas that gives me the greatest pleasure. But at the same time, I think as an organisation, we try to behave quite well, so we package it all up, and just in case they missed it, we tell them. Yeah. And so we do actually try and make sure that we present ourselves well. That may be in strategic reviews. Sometimes that's in tender processes for us. But again, we take it all up and we try to visualise and demonstrate and put financial values behind it as well, on how we're actually trying to demonstrate what we're doing to these customers.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a more, there is tradition in that as well, in
Yeah,
that
there is,
behaviour.
yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
bit more sort of,
Yeah. And again, I think one of the things to understand in our area is that a lot of our customers are owner principals. Yeah. And so again, it's it's not large PLCs that you're having multiple levels of point of influence and contact.
Right.
We're slightly different in the way, and we've got very deliberate choices on the type of customer that we like to engage with within that space. And so these people just, they do like to know what's in it for me. And so that's where we try to keep bringing the relationship. And at the end of the day, it's to make sure that we're always moving it away from price. The conversation's always got to move away from price. So fundamentally, all of our marketing programs and the way that we want to present ourselves is about trying to justify a brand tax, as I call it. Now, that might be 1.5%, that might be 2%, it's certainly not 10%. But those increments can make a world of difference because, of course, our brilliant Brazilian competitors or our Chinese competitors or even some of the mainland European competitors, they turn up with today's price. And so we've got to make sure that we keep moving the conversation along within that space. And there's many businesses that I've worked in that have got similar challenges, whereby that commoditized element is always getting beat up about the next euro cent. And so it's just trying to make sure that we keep moving that conversation along and put as much substance into that as we possibly can.
Well, buying cheap can be very expensive too.
Yeah,
very expensive.
I have to say, from a perspective of an organisation that's competing in a relatively commoditized market, Medite is an absolute standout case study of the benefits of investing in your brand, because as Chris is alluding to, the brand Medite is really strong, and in a commoditized market, having that powerful brand allows you to put on that little bit of price, which goes a long way into driving the margins. But it really is a fantastic example of the power of investing in brand.
I mean, that's a big decision that you've made there. So what are your expectations, clear cut, from your agency?
Clearly the agency has got to demonstrate relevance back to me in the way that I want to demonstrate relevance to my customers. What does that mean? That means, they've got all the skill sets, that there's scale there. Perhaps there's understanding of the sector, albeit that's not always a critical element, and it wasn't the strongest criteria when we were dealing with Finn. And so that there's breadth of offering And clearly that, when you're talking with people in the first instance, that there's intellectual horsepower that's in the room as well.
Yeah.
And if I come back to it and think that my partner has got to add value to my thinking, I'm quite demanding in how good my thinking is.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah,
therefore that's what I want to really look at. And that was a very persuasive thing when dealing with Elliot, is because I really felt that he could and challenge my thinking and really start to move me around left and right in that space. So that's fundamentally the biggest thing that I look for, because delivering effective campaigns and getting that level of response and return, those are all good things, but they become quite difficult to distinguish between one agency and another agency when you're going through a tender process. So that's one of the real key elements from there, and actually to feel that you're interested,
Yeah,
and that I'm not
motivated,
just another client, or I'm not just another paycheck, or I'm not just something else. That actually that people are quite interested in our business. With the challenges, it's commoditized, but we're doing push and pull, and we've got different business units, and we're in different markets, and it's an interesting story in today's world with sustainability, and so because I do feel that we are quite interesting in that context, so it's to recognise that interest is there. So that really played back. And so that's really what I look for. And then, of course, once we get into it, it's about, are things well planned? I don't respond well necessarily if we put, £1 up and, the plan comes back at 125, but that's not happened either. Yeah. So respect of the budget process, respect of what we can do and what we can bring. So again, that's a very important aspect, as opposed to just trying to pick my pocket. So that's really, some of the key elements that I look for beyond, you've got the best social team, and you've got great designers, and you've got great planners and project management team. To some extent, from my point, there I am. Housekeeping is the wrong way to see it, because of course from your side, you will then demonstrate that as being a standout quality. I understand that. But for me, it goes beyond that. It's the wealth of knowledge and the value that you can actually bring to our organisation.
And then I'll bounce that back for you. But Elliot, from your angle, it's when you're also selecting the clients that you work with, and when you commit and know you can deliver to a certain client, because it's got to be, you've got to have that ability. You've got to know that you've got something that you can add value. Can you define that and sort of talk about that process of how you map in to what Chris is saying? Like, how do you even...
Look, absolutely. I think look, as part of answering that question, I think what Chris has just said there is gold to any agency, because for agency people out there, obviously myself included, we can get sort of stuck in the tactical expertise and the brilliance of our teams, but to a certain extent for our own industry sector, meaning that the agency industry sector, those to a certain extent have almost become commoditized, right? And it's about all the value that you layer on top of those things that actually bring those things to life. So look, to answer to your question, obviously we do have tactical teams. We've got market sector specialists, market and sector specialists, and we pull these teams together. So we're actually really well set up to work with organisations like Medite, who have relatively complex go-to-market strategies, multiple markets, different customer groups, and so on and so forth. And in terms of the motivation of our agency and the teams, I think agencies love working with passionate people and passionate brands. And yes, Medite, it's a commoditized sector that they're working in, but the brand is really powerful, and there's a story behind that brand. And marketing people generally love taking stories, brand stories to market, and that's how we're referring to this pull strategy. You create that pull, and when we are going through resellers, it's actually the power of the brand that enables those resellers and partners and distributors to also be successful. And as Chris was alluding to, there's partnerships all around, right? We're talking about an agency partnership, but you have distributor partners that are incredibly important to your business, and the brand really underpins all of that success. But that's why controlling that narrative and making sure you've got a handle of your brand how it's pushed through all of these channels is important, particularly when you've invested so much over so many years.
And I think if I add as well, our core, to try and be a little bit more concise about it, our core strategic proposition is about relevance within the marketplace. And that relevance, at the end of the day, distinguishes us against our competition and defines the business to some extent. And I've got 4 components that play into that. One is scale, so we've got to support growth. One is intimacy, so we have the relationships. One is focus, so we're clearly targeted. We know where we want to trade and who we want to trade with. And the other is innovation. And then coming back to our supply chain, so whether that's someone from a resin perspective or the fibre that we're having or our logistics partners or our agency marketing partners, there's got to be a correlation to that. So that then gives us a structure that runs through the business, and everybody's connected then and aligned fundamentally to what we're trying to be. And so we look for that across our extended supply chain. And it's very important, from a marketing point of view, it's critically important.
We spoke about the value added, we spoke about relationships and all that lovely, lovely stuff. But now I would like to hear from both of you in your own way. So you from sort of the business perspective, strategy direction, Elliot, you from marketing, real hard data. How does data, numbers, statistics, any of that influence the strategic direction that you take your business?
We have it perhaps goes into two key areas. So one would just be, and really linked to almost the commoditized element of our business.
Okay.
We've got to understand what's happening in an economic sense, in a political sense, because at the end of the day, that just has an impact on how much we sell, and at what price. It very much comes down to that. So there's a huge playbook which goes into there. I think the second aspect is, again, for us, really looking at the pull element of our business. So really getting into this element where we're trying to make a difference and trying to represent ourselves differently from our competitors. We'll engage with various specification tools. We'll try and present ourselves in a particular way. We'll promote ourselves. And we look at the data which is then coming back from within that area, fundamentally just linked to lead generation, how much is coming in at the top of the funnel, how much comes out at the bottom of the funnel, and really trying to get a focus. As I try to say to the team, I like 3%, I'm impressed by it, but I'm far more persuaded by something that I can almost see on the P&L. And that's really where I tried to get it. So again, from a data point of view, it's trying to make sure the teams and the connections and all the relationships understand I've got to see it coming out the bottom of the funnel. So all the data clearly is important as it's going in the top, but what does actually the conversion level look like as we actually get into there? So and again, it's quite an expansive area. We've got lots, I think, good examples of how we're trying to move within those zones. But at the end of the day, it's about how we move the dial and fundamentally deliver profitable growth for the business.
Yeah. Okay. And from a marketing deep data analysis, Al, what is that?
So it's really fascinating listening to Chris talk about, in commodity markets, it's about supply and demand, and you have to be very reactive. There's lots of parallels actually with the way that we optimize digital advertising, social media campaigns, because viewers may or may not know that, buying, Google social media ad space, it is a supply and demands driven marketplace. Now there is an important aspect where it's quality of the ad. So the quality and relevance of the ad plays into that price. So it's not simply supply and demand, it's also quality and relevance, because all of these channels, they obviously require ads to generate their own revenue, but they want those ads to be as relevant and ideally as useful and interesting to their end consumers. So they reward advertisers by creating good quality ads. So the experts who operate these campaigns within our business, almost on a daily basis, they're monitoring supply and demand, but they're also monitoring market feedback against the quality of our ads and making those daily adjustments in order to increase the quality, which maximizes value by optimizing the cost per ultimately the cost per conversion. So that's there's lots of parallels with the way that Chris's
It's a
organisation
very micro
operates.
level management. Of
Yeah.
But it's how you bring the value.
How do you balance profitability with responsible sourcing?
We're part of the forestry division within Ireland, and we're actually planting 22 million trees per year.
Wow. Gosh.
And it's commercial forestry. A large part is commercial forestry.
Yep.
That then goes into the sawmills, or some comes directly into us. But all of those, the estates and the trees are managed under certified schemes.
Right, okay.
And those are global systems which are in place. So that really takes care of, I think, of the making sure we're planting more than we're harvesting is an
Amazing.
important element.
That's really good.
As it plays into the business. So that's an important dynamic.
That's a really important dynamic.
Yeah, really.
That is a really important dynamic.
Really, yeah.
Yeah,
But at the same time,
fantastic.
we put glues through
Yeah.
the wood fibre or the wood chips to ultimately make these highly engineered panels. So we'll have relationships with our supply chain within that space, because again, we've all got to we've got to remove carbon from our processes. People are operating to different timelines. We've got a very clear plan about what we're trying to do in that space, and so. Not only is there integrity in the partners that we have, but we've got extensive R&D teams which are engaged in actually how we can continue to evolve what we're trying to do, and ultimately, meet the challenges which are laid forward for all the businesses at this point in time. It's quite difficult to lay that down against a commercial proposition. Because we find within our market, as we mentioned earlier, it's highly commoditized. So, at this point in time, if you tell someone it's worth 5 euro cents more and it's half the carbon, they will default to the base product. So within the markets that we're operating, this will be a really important journey, that we're going to go on and it's not the next year or 18 months. This is going to be something that evolves over the next 4, 5, 8, 10, 12 years. And of course, there's ultimately an end game of 2050, but there's intermediate steps which go along those lines. We've got our own programs in place around that. So that's a challenging development. Coming back to it from where we are, we're a timber product, and timber ultimately is a fantastic story with regards to absorbing carbon. It's from a substitutional point of view, using timber against let's say steel or bricks, blocks, etc. Is a really good story, a really positive story within that space, and that's something that we need to work on collectively now as we move forward to make sure actually that from a commercial point of view, that becomes a little bit more meaningful.
Oh yeah,
and a lot of voices from the construction industry need to take part in that, to make sure that perhaps the market actually wants it.
I think also the value added, what you do with the timber, the way that you react and have the R&D, how you add that value. For example, if you want your timber, once it goes into that process to be used for making a house, you want it to be resistant to fire, all those things. So all of this plays a role. You've got to be on top of what's happening in the world. And then, like you were saying, that R&D side is hugely important. And then from the agency point of view, getting that information and really pushing that out.
Yeah, I think a lot of the themes that Chris has been touching on there, they go directly into the PR strategy and the earned media approaches and the above the line activity, because clearly these are conversations that there's many audiences wanting to take part in, and Medite is clearly a really important voice in those conversations.
Yeah. So in terms of what you're doing at the moment, or you have been doing, is there a standout campaign or something that you're doing now or have done that's interesting to you? And if so, why?
Well, it's probably a work in progress, actually. So one of the challenges that I want to lay in front of my team is that I want to be the go-to person. So if somebody needs to know something, in the industry about product performance or product suitability or technical regulations or whatever it may be. I want to demonstrate that technical leadership. That's very important. And again, with the way that we're set up and structured within our business, I think we've got the opportunity to put some differentiation in there. And so again, working with the team at Finn, we've come up with I think quite an interesting proposition about how we almost personify that messaging into the marketplace. And so it's relatively conceptual at this point in time, but I'm really pushing that through within our own business, because I do see that as being a real standout quality against our competition. And so again, that's a really good example of the team at Finn understanding what we want to achieve, taking that on and playing something back to me and going, oh, I like that. Yeah.
It's potentially a fascinating project, because you think about a brand like Medite, there's so much heritage, there's so much experience, and there's so much knowledge, but a lot of it is under the surface. It's sitting inside people's brains. It's sitting inside obviously files and folders inside the infrastructure. So it's about how can we surface that knowledge to add value to the market that we're speaking to, the prospects and broader market that we're speaking to, without obviously giving the whole thing away. And it's an interesting way of providing access, but as Chris says, personifying and putting a sort of a character behind it. That will hopefully support and over the coming months and years add a lot of value to the brand.
I think that's the important element as well. So again, looking back at what do I look for in agency partners, it's not just the next campaign. It's actually understanding that I like things that's got legs, that we can do it, we can build it, we can create a narrative around it, and it's perfectly aligned with the strategic ambitions of the business. But it just makes it real. And it's not something that we're just doing for the summer or the winter or wherever it may be. And so therefore, of course, we'll do those things and we need that energy which comes into our programs. But this is something that will just run and create, and it'll be alive, really. So I think it's super. So I'm really looking forward to see the manifestation of this and what it actually looks like in the coming weeks and months, and then that will be something that to come back to, what kind of data do we look at? Well, that will be points of engagement, for example, because that is people coming to us and going, what do I do next?
So let's talk about that. So how are you looking to the future to make sure that you're going to be ahead? A lot of it actually comes back to probably two parts, really. One, looking at from a regulatory point of view, because again, we're operating predominantly within the European market. There's lots of new regulation which is coming forward. Some of that is relatively easy to embrace. Some of it's incredibly difficult to embrace. So again, that's the R&D teams that we have both inside the business, but actually working with our supply chain partners in the same way that we would work with our marketing partners. Again, looking at how they can add value to us in that type of space. That will ultimately create new product propositions, which then ultimately feeds into the relationships that we have with Finn and the team. So that's a really interesting point. And that may be around fire, that may be around moisture, that may be around structural integrity, that may be around some of the constituent parts that go into the product. And then we've got the secondary aspect. It's around sustainability and carbon abatement. What comes across really well, as we're listening to you, as you're speaking, is just the genuine care for what you're doing, that your heart is in the right place and your mind is in the right place. That just makes for a really good business, a good organization that's adding value now to our world, to our planet, to people. I think that's a fantastic, powerful message in itself, I have to say. So for our listeners who are learning about marketing, we've got a lot of senior executives listening to the podcast that perhaps also looking after business in complicated industries with a lot going on. Do you have any advice for them?
Try to understand the areas that you can influence. And so therefore really understand the business, understand the competitive landscape, Try to work out what's important to the organisation and where you think you can make a positive difference, and find good people to work with.
Chris and Elliot, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.